The river turned to blood, and Egypt stopped breathing. Men walked to the Nile with jars and ropes and returned holding buckets that smelled of iron and rot. The water that made the nation shimmered thick and red, fish coming belly up, reeds collapsing into slime. Priests burned incense, magicians copied tricks, and Pharaoh waved Moses away as if swatting a fly. For 7 days the country thirsted while its river looked back like a wound. Moses had warned him. He stood beside Aaron in the palace light and spoke a sentence that did not come from any counsel. "Let my people go." Pharaoh's eyes never softened. Power made him deaf. When the water cleared and city men shouted with relief, he smiled the brittle smile of a man who believes storms pass if you ignore their thunder. Then frogs came like a second heartbeat. They poured from canals and temple pools, slick backs shining with river film, filling ovens, beds, and bowls, hopping across polished floors into Pharaoh's own chambers. Children shrieked, then gagged. Heket's image, once carved on amulets, multiplied in living form until devotion tasted like disgust. "Pray," Pharaoh ordered. Moses prayed. The frogs died where they lay, stacked into steaming heaps until the streets reeked, and still his heart locked. Dust lifted and became teeth. Gnats rose as if the land itself had decided to fly and bite. They found eyes and nostrils, crawled under linen collars, coated cattle in a gray living crust. The palace magicians lowered their gaze and spoke the words kings hate most. "This is the finger of God." Pharaoh stiffened his neck and doubled his guard at the doors. Flies followed, dense, black, voracious, their buzz like wire saws. They poured through shutters into bakeries and storerooms, settled on meat, crawled on lips, turned speech into coughing. In Goshen the air remained clean. Children there ate and slept, without a single speck landing on their bread. Word carried back to the palace that Israel's quarter was quiet, and the king's hands whitened on the arms of his chair. He bargained, promised worship, and broke his promise by morning. Then the animals began to fall. Horses staggered and lay down. Donkeys stiffened. Oxen rolled their great eyes and were still. Fields cupped silence where the bell of cattle once sounded. Pharaoh sent men to Goshen to count what stood. They returned with the report no pride could make small. Israel's herds were whole. He stood at the window a long time and told himself the tally was wrong because the truth felt like surrender. Boils struck without a wind. Pustules rose like burning coins on flesh. Men walked with their arms lifted from their sides, afraid to touch their own skin. Women wrapped cloth across their mouths and spoke through their teeth. Even the magicians, powdered and perfumed, hid behind pillars, too blistered to bow. Pharaoh's captains waited for orders he could not give, because no sword was useful and no decree could be hammered into the body of a plague. Then the sky hammered Egypt. Hail mixed with fire plunged from a roof of black cloud, beating barley flat, shredding flax, splintering date palms that had seen 100 summers. The storm sounded like stone mills crushing bone. Moses had warned them to bring servants and beasts inside. Some laughed, some ran, and the ones who ran lived. When the hail stopped, steam rose from the fields like breath from a wounded giant. Pharaoh confessed, Moses prayed, the thunder hushed, and pride returned. The 8th plague arrived as a moving horizon. Locusts thick enough to dim the sun rolled over the eastern hills and descended as one vast appetite. They ate the ragged green the hail had spared. They ate bark and broom and the frayed last hopes of poor men who had counted ears of barley like coins. A boy beat a pot with a stick until his arms failed, and the insects walked across the drum as if it were a road. Pharaoh begged. Moses prayed. The wind cleared the sky. The promise dissolved. Darkness then. Not night, but a weight, Lamps threw halos that died a hand's breadth from the wick. Men reached for their wives and touched only cold black. Children cried because they could hear voices but could not see faces. The sun god Ra, painted in gold on 100 walls, could not find his own image. In Goshen, every house had light. Pharaoh tried a last bargain, go, but leave the herds, and Moses answered with a shepherd's calm that the flocks belonged to God and would not be left. Then came the night Egypt still dreams. Moses told the elders to take a lamb without blemish, to slaughter it at twilight, to brush its blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, to roast and eat with bitter herbs and unleavened bread, belt tight, sandals on, staff in hand. It is the Lord's Passover, he said. When he sees the blood, he will pass over you. Mothers marked their doors with trembling hands. Fathers hushed the little ones and listened to the wind scrape the roof tiles. At midnight, the cry rose. It started in the palace and leapt house to house like flame. Firstborn sons who had grown tall and careless were found still as stone. Infants who had nursed at dusk lay limp against their mothers' breasts. In prisons, men discovered the bodies of boys they had braced in their minds against the day of release. In stables, prized stallions bowed and did not lift again. Where the blood shone on wood, the angel's step was silence. In Goshen, children slept through. Pharaoh sent for Moses in the middle watch. He did not sit on his throne. His face was the color of ash. Go, he said, words breaking like dry twigs. Take your flocks and your children. Bless me also. Egypt shoved gifts at the departing. Bracelets, rings, silver cups, currency for an exit no one had planned. Dough went into bowls without leaven. Cloaks were pulled tight. Bones of the lamb were left unbroken. A people walked out with the thunder of many feet, leaving a city echoing with grief. The plagues were not accidents strung in a line. They were a trial in which God called Egypt's gods to the stand and found them without breath. Hapi could not sweeten his river. Heket could not make frogs holy. Hathor and Apis could not save a single cow. Ra could not lift the darkness. Pharaoh, styled a living god, could not keep his own house from death. Each blow cut deeper between a king's pride and the Lord's command. Each mercy was a door of repentance that Pharaoh slammed. Israel learned while Egypt bled. They learned to trust orders that sounded like ritual until the night proved those orders were rescue. They learned that judgment and mercy can pass down the same street at the same hour, and that blood on wood is a sign you do not negotiate with. You obey it, or you explain a grave to a mother. They learned that freedom arrives like haste, that you leave before the bread has time to rise, because slavery does not deserve a farewell feast. By dawn, the road east was a ribbon of dust. The people carried bones and stories, bowls and babies, the weight of 400 years, and the lightness that follows the first breath after chains fall. Behind them, the river rolled on as if it had never turned to blood, as if frogs and flies and hail were rumors told by men who drink too much wine. But houses stood empty where firstborn sons should have been tying sandals, and even Pharaoh's guard knew a power had written its name across the land. There would be more story, sea and desert, hunger and water from rock, but the grammar of deliverance had been set. When God speaks, kings have 2 choices, bend or break. Pharaoh chose to break and broke everything he touched. The plagues were not spectacle, they were truth made visible. Idols are expensive, pride is lethal, and freedom runs along a river of judgment that does not miss a door marked in faith. Thank you for listening to Divine Crime. Subscribe for more true stories from the most dangerous book ever written.